Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. I'm here with Craft Taydus, Virginia Warrior Mom. And we're back for a second installment of our Dissonant Dispatch regarding psychology and what's going on with that. In our last show, we talked about some changes to the DSM V, the language in there, and how it was primarily impacting gender dysphoria and things like that. Tonight, we're going to get into school counselors, how kids are being evaluated and diagnosed at school, and what that might mean to you and what you should be thinking about it. Before we get started, please hit that like button, share this broadcast out so we can get other people hearing this important information, and be ready with your questions because we're here to also take your questions or comments as we go. There's a lot of information. Anne is a crack researcher. So she goes down rabbit holes, as we've talked about, and she gets like into the weeds. So what we're trying to do is present you with some key takeaways from all this research, not overwhelm you. I'm asking you in advance to bear with us because there is a lot of information. And I just want to preface this show with a couple of caveats. First, neither Anne nor I are trying to suggest that all therapists are bad, that all school counselors are bad or, ill-intentioned, or that mental health is not an important component of the overall picture of the health of our kids and our schools and all that. We're not saying that. Every time there is school violence, the first thing that people say on both sides of the political aisle is we have a mental health crisis in America. And I doubt that Anne would disagree. And I certainly agree that is true. I think where we tend to part ways with the American School Counselors Association, or ASCA, and a lot of school counselors is in summing up like what that crisis is, like what it looks
where
like,
it comes from,
where it comes from.
It's not an alien that just landed. It came from somewhere, is what I tell people all the time. Like, do you know what's been taught over the last 5 or 10 years? Do you know what your child has learned? Do you know why your child is all of a sudden coming home completely different? Like, you have no idea, then let's not layer more mental health curriculum to solve the mental health crisis, is what I tell people all the time.
We tend to look at it as and say, look, there are a lot of moving parts here, and we don't want to rush to try to solve the problem and then create more problems. Right. We saw with COVID, it was like, oh my God, a virus. And so we rushed and tried to solve a problem. We created way bigger problems because people didn't stop and think about the long-term impacts. So our position is going into this broadcast that when you're talking about the mental health of children, you have to be extra careful because you're talking about a developing mind, a developing psyche, somebody young and brand new on this planet. Their brain is developing rapidly, but it's not done. It's not going to be done until well after 12th grade. And they're a captive audience. They're vulnerable. They're impressionable. There are so many, and you, the parents, are not there. So what we want you to understand, like I said, going into this, we were trying to approach this thoughtfully, not like Chicken Little house on fire. And we're also hoping that you take away some key questions that you can ask yourself, your school, the school counselor that might ever approach you in the context of your kid's school, and so that you can protect yourself and protect your child. Because if you just stay kind of passive and let them try to solve the mental health crisis they perceive exists their way, some very bad things could happen. So they really could, and we don't want that to happen. So, and do you think we should begin with ASCA's principles, just like what it is how they see themselves as school counselors? Or
I
where do you
think
think we should start?
let's start with, so last week was the APA and the DSM V. So let's do the APA, because they obviously, the American Psychiatric Association, has their own 20 principles from psychology for pre-K teaching and learning.
Okay,
So,
great. So do I have that, or do you want to send me that?
Yeah, you have the one. I think that's the one that with the colored blocks on it. You think the one is the one you thought it was ASCA, but it's actually APA.
Okay.
The 20
the top 20 principles. Got it. All right, let me pull this up.
So yeah,
and
I stumbled on this. I don't know when it came out, not long ago. And they have their own principles for pre-K through 12.
Okay, so this is what we're looking at, right?
Right.
American Psychological Association. Okay, so these documents that talk about principles, key principles, are so important because it tells you, the parent, where they're coming from, the lens, if you will, that they are, the belief system they already have, the premises they are coming to this work with. And you should always look at these asking yourself, do I agree? Now, you might say, well, Deb, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Who am I to agree or disagree? You're a parent, and these are your children, and you have every right to think about these things thoughtfully and say, does that make sense to me? If only.
And then ask yourself too, why don't I know about this? Is what I tell parents all the time. Is that because, guys, there's law in Virginia. There's one explicitly that says you have to be notified. You cannot counsel a child without a parent affirmative, not in loco parentis. And so is that I tell people all the time, you need to ask yourself why you don't even know about this.
There's a lot going on behind the scenes. And we sort of take for granted that, like, I'm sure they have our kids' best interests at heart and everything is great. And they just want our kids to learn and be happy. Well, what if that's not true? And it doesn't mean they don't have to be like malicious monsters in the background going, whoa. It's just, what if that isn't their highest value? What if their highest value is achieving social justice? What if their highest value is equity? What if it's not what your highest value is? So what Anne's saying is, like, you ought to know where they're coming from. So here it is. And let's just go through these. I mean, why not? Principle 1. Students' beliefs or perceptions about intelligence and ability affect their cognitive functioning and learning. Now, again, I haven't done the research and I haven't read the research, but that seems like a pretty bold statement that they affect their cognitive. My questions as a parent will be, how much? To what extent? How do you know? And what if you're wrong? So in other words, what if you're wrong that they do, and you're going to project a bunch of junk onto my kid and you're just wrong? So that's first.
My thought would be so this is PK through 12. What does my kindergartner know about intelligence that's going to affect her cognitive functioning and learning? Like
exactly.
That's me and my common sense. That's what I would be saying, would be like, what does my child believe or perceive in PK, K, 1, 2, 3, 4, if you've not already given it to her?
That's right.
Like, that's how I would think, is that what does my child even know to build any foundation on? Exactly. Would be what I would think.
Exactly. What students already know affects their learning. That seems like water is wet. So like some of these principles are kind of like, duh. And some of them are, as Anne just said, well, are they a genius? Like they know, my concept of intelligence at the ripe old age of 4. So it's weird. Number 3, students' cognitive development and learning are not limited by general stages of development. Well, that could go 2 ways. On the one hand, they could be stating, again, the obvious, that there are individual differences, that there's not sort of an arbitrary stage of development that every single kid is going to adhere to strictly. Or they could be saying the stages of development don't really exist.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that after researching that, and I'm just saying this is an opinion, but a well-founded one, is that that's what they're saying. They're saying that, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs has been flipped. Like, is that everything has ever been founded on has now been, like, and that's just as a researcher, is I would like it to believe that it's differentiated is what they're talking about. This is not what they're talking about.
And I tend to agree with Anne there. From what I've read and seen, they have been steadily getting rid of everything we ever learned about Piaget and everything we ever learned about learning,
Correct.
Developmental stages. And that is why they come at you with, your 5-year-old needs to know about blowjobs. Like, no, they don't.
Right. Yes.
Or they're going to look it up on the internet anyway. No, they're not. They have no concept of this.
Yes.
Learning is based on context. So generalizing learning to new contexts is not spontaneous, but instead needs to be facilitated. I disagree so strongly. I don't even know how to express how strongly I disagree.
And that is right. How I read that is this student-led learning. Teachers are no longer teachers. They are facilitators, is how I read that. Is that kids go into the class. How would you like to learn today? How do you best learn? I'm going to be your buddy, and I'm going to, and then your friend next to you is going to teach you today. Is like what I see facilitate. It's one of those things that's why our kids aren't learning anything, because the teachers.
This also doesn't leave any room for memorization at all. Learning is based on context.
It's evil. Like literally,
not necessarily.
I'm saying I'm just saying I went to every single history standards of learning town hall. Rote memorization is useless. Teachers saying this, and I'm sitting here going, Alabama and Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado, and I'm like, what do you build off of if you don't have recall? Like, recall is pointless. Right. I'm like, y'all are teachers. Like, where have we come to?
It's very important for people to understand that in order to think, we think in words. Most of us do. Okay, we are a verbal creature, species. So if you lack vocabulary and everything that you know about has words associated with it. So you might have like a word to describe a thing, or you could have a whole suite of words, a bucket of words to describe a bucket of things, or even one thing for that matter, because there are concepts that go with that. So your ability to think about new situations, about those new contexts, absolutely depends on what you've learned before. That is true. But you don't need to be in a new context to learn. I could be sitting in a room. I could be sitting in just like 4 white walls with no window and, like a door, and that's it. And you could just give me a bunch of books about subjects that I've never read about before. If I know how to read and I have a broad vocabulary and you hand me a dictionary, I don't need a context to be able to learn that. I just don't. To say that the brain just doesn't function until you put somebody in a situation where it's like, and this is where you'll use this knowledge, is false. It's absolutely false. And this is the principle that justifies all the student-led nonsense. Okay.
Well, that's what they're saying too, is that they're saying 50 to 60% of jobs kids will haven't been created. They're never going to need this. We're not going to teach it. And my whole thing is,
they actually believe you can use a calculator and a computer to solve all your problems.
They'll tell you they don't teach penmanship anymore because of keyboards. Like they're that bold. I'm like, who in the world are you to determine what you're going to toss out because of what we know it's going to happen, but what might happen?
Exactly. Acquiring long-term knowledge and skill is largely dependent on practice. Again, water is wet. But what are we practicing? If we need a context for everything and a facilitator for everything, what is it exactly that we're practicing? Waiting for someone to tell us what to do? It contradicts. Clear, explanatory, and timely feedback to students is important for learning. Again, I don't know that I completely agree. It depends what they mean. So there are autodictats. Autodictats don't have somebody going, let me give you feedback on what you're learning and let me instruct you and let me tell you and let me do this.
AI, this is where it comes in.
Yeah, they don't mean a person talking. They just mean correct.
Right.
Blinking
That's
lights,
what that says to me is timely feedback. It's like when we used to, in our 20s, like when I took the LSAT or whatever, you got immediate feedback when you click that button.
They actually believe, I've read some research, they're going backwards almost to behaviorism, to believing that if we drop the food, look, the doggy will ring the bell. Look, look, the doggy will ring the bell to get the food. So they're not talking about, we're picturing nice teachers saying, good job, Johnny, and that kind of feedback, or here's an A, or let me explain what you did wrong. That's not what they mean. That's not what they mean. They mean, bing, ring a bell. You got it right.
Going,
you got it wrong.
Roberta, you did great today. Like, pick your Siri voice for the day. Like, we have 66 math classes here that are in the building. They're taught remotely, no human teacher, and they have like just proctors that walk around the class all day long. And that's the future of learning.
They call it learning. It's just it's anyway. All right. So then we have student self-regulation assists learning, and self-regulatory skills can be taught. And water is wet. Yes, but that's true. Of course it assists learning. If I can't regulate my own, whatever, my emotions, my energy level, whatever, it's going to be hard to sit in school and learn, right? It's going to be very hard.
What I hear is self-regulation in 5-year-olds who are being taught to sit in front of a computer all day, and they're punished. And this was a parent contacting me last week that, oh, you're 20 minutes. That's your max for the day now at 5 years old by law. Because collectively you did not behave well. You don't get any all week. I have a 6-year-old. I cannot imagine anything more evil than teaching self-regulation to a 5-year-old and then punishing them with taking away their recess.
Just remember, you guys, we don't have students anymore. We have learners.
They're learners, which is Virginia's for learners. Like, it's our motto. Like,
we don't have classes anymore. We have learning. So when they talk about facilitates learning, important for learning, here classroom, here the teacher in the classroom, hear whatever you want to hear, but don't imagine learning as actually acquiring knowledge and conceptualizing. And no, put that out of your mind. Whenever you see for learning, important for learning, they mean classroom management. That's what they mean. Your child is not a student acquiring. No. They're a learner. They're a learner.
I had to dissect that, and I actually found a student versus a learning. It's a factory model. Like, it's literally how they explain a student versus a learner. Like, it's like a trainee in a business environment versus a pupil. Like, and it's extremely different.
Exactly. Let's see. But I mean, no, yes, we can argue that self-regulation is important, but you need different kinds of self-regulation for different environments. So for example, how I self-regulate in the woods, if I'm in a forest school in Germany or Norway, and how I self-regulate out there is going to be radically different than how I have to self-regulate in this factory school model in front of a screen where everyone's being quiet, whatever. And to your point, a 5-year-old is going to have an easier time just automatically, organically, without anyone teaching them anything, self-regulating in the woods. But in the classroom, yes, they have to be taught. They have to be taught how to sit still because it's not natural. So we read that and we think, well, yes, of course you have to be taught how to sit still. But we don't, to Anne's point, think about pre-K. Is that what you want? You want your 4-year-old to be taught how to self-regulate and sit in a chair and stare at a screen? Because that's not an automatic good thing. So what they're saying as a principle is they're stating the truth, but it doesn't mean it's good for your kid. Okay. Let's see. Students' creativity can be fostered. Debatable, but okay, I'll go with it. Students tend to enjoy learning and perform better when they're more intrinsically than extrinsically motivated to achieve. This word tend is doing a lot of heavy lifting, in my opinion. And I say that because
it's all
they tend to enjoy learning when they're intrinsically motivated. Yes and no. Some of the learning that I enjoyed the most, I enjoyed retroactively, accidentally, because I was under pressure to learn it by external motivations, like getting a decent grade on the test or, finishing a project or whatever. And then I looked back and said,
the extrinsic made me
took that class.
Love the extrinsic and being grounded made me love math. Like, it's like, and then I look at that too, and I want to go then why are you doing PBIS? Like, one of the worst behavior. It's like it's things like that. But but right there I read it's the whole thing of can't fail children, outcomes based education, nobody fails. And then nobody learns,
and also the student-led learning, which is, they have to be interested in it. Which is just code for they have to be entertained. They have to immediately perceive a value. No, they don't. They don't. And
They're
remember,
children.
it says enjoy learning. Well, I'm sorry, but is enjoying it the primary value?
Right.
Now, I'm not saying they should be miserable. They should be miserable, but they're very
children,
often
they might be.
You don't enjoy the learning until after you've done it, and then you realize, oh, I really am glad I did that. So are we leading these kids or are we following? So I don't love this principle 9. Principle 10, students persist in the face of challenging tasks and process information more deeply when they adopt mastery goals rather than performance goals. Not necessarily true. That's just not, they're making a very bold statement that you as parents need to think about. Do I agree with that? It may be true sometimes, but when they call it a principle, they're saying this is so most of the time. Not true for all kids. Not even true, I would say, for most kids. There are many kids that persist in the face of challenging tasks when they have a performance goal. Look at every athlete you've ever known. Are they out there trying to master their free throws? Or are they like, I'm going to score the most free throws in the game and I'm going to win the game for the team. And that motivates the heck out of them. And they persist and they persist and they persist. Again, speaking from personal experience, doing a lot of hard stuff in school, it was performance goals drove me. I don't think I'm unique. I don't think I'm special. I think I'm actually pretty typical. I'm not saying all kids are like me, but I bet you could probably come down with like right down the middle. It's probably, if not 50-50, it's probably pretty close. And I can't think of a single situation where I said to myself, I just want to master this. I want a goal where I've mastered it. Now, I will say there are kids who, if they get through several years and they haven't mastered something and they've just hit I got an A, I got an A, I got an A. Some of them will look back and go, I feel icky. I got A's, but I don't know anything.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. So
that does happen, but it's retroactive.
Mastery right now, like out of Amy Goodale, like I hear it all the time out of the Virginia Board of Education. Mastery, mastery, mastery. And it was one of those things, and I was like, it's like rigor. Like, I'm like, what does that mean? But, so I have to go figure out what it means. Like, so mastery is like, it's the whole thing, like anti-seat time, like get the kids out as quick as possible, is that they just have to get a certain amount of hours to master something. It doesn't mean they actually know it. They haven't achieved like the knowledge, like as where.
Well, it's such a fungible term, mastery. They could literally say that a child has mastered it when they did 3 problems in a row and got a correct answer. How is that different from a performance,
like evidence-based
goal?
Like,
what does that mean?
One time somewhere.
Teachers' expectations about their students affect students' opportunities to learn, their motivation, and their learning outcomes. Perhaps it depends on the kid.
These are psychologists, okay? I'm just going to remind people what we're reading from. Like, these are psychologists telling the teachers what their principles to teach from are.
Right.
So, I mean,
that's really important.
Like
Thank you for mentioning that. Well, it's also important to remember they're psychologists making blanket statements about how a child or a student, learner, whatever, how they learn. Now, it does not follow. I want to be very clear on this, that just because somebody is a psychologist, that they understand the science of learning.
No.
They don't. They're not this. These disciplines do not automatically overlap. This is overreaching outside the bounds of their discipline in the extreme. Okay,
and making teachers then step way outside of there, and the counselors too, who aren't licensed to do any of that.
There's a whole separate study of how humans learn, and psychologists aren't all automatically trained in it or understand it. So a lot of these things are theoretical. A lot of this is theoretical. A lot of this is not grounded in like anything you could say it's like proven. All right. And when we get to the ASCA stuff and you see their goals for social justice, it will all make sense, because you realize, well, we have to set up this theoretical framework for psychology so that the school counselors can use an ideological framework for counseling. All right. Setting goals that are short-term, proximal, specific, and moderately challenging enhances motivation more than establishing goals that are long-term, distal, general, and overly challenging. Again, it depends. Maybe, maybe not. Learning is for a very young child, probably true. For a 10th grader, maybe not. Learning is situated within multiple social contexts, and there it is. It makes its debut.
Wow, it's coming.
There it is. Learning is situated. That's one of those word salad thingies that, like, what does it mean? We don't know.
Social contacts. It's coming.
Interpersonal relationships and communication are critical to both the teaching learning process and the social emotional development of students. Again, in the context of a school. In the context of a school. Take this situation into your home or out in the woods or in a very small
relationships with whom? It's like,
exactly.
I would read, like, it's like that thing that you posted about I'm going to be your best advocate, the thing on the teacher's wall. And how many people on my Facebook page were like, I don't see a problem with this. And I was like, Deb, can you have me out here?
I know, right? Exactly. Emotional well-being influences educational performance, learning, and development. Okay. Yes and no. And guess what? Learning can often influence emotional well-being. Sometimes you need to be successful at something and you need to learn something in order to feel good about yourself. This notion they keep pushing on you parents that your kid has to be mentally well before they can learn, that your kid has to like have all their little mental ducks in a row. They have to be happy. They have to be well adjusted. They can't have any anxiety. They can't have any, and nothing can be going wrong or they can't learn is just not true. It's not true. Demonstrably not true. We can give you example after example after example. Now, does that mean that a kid's going to, learn in an optimal way in every situation when they're having lots of anxiety? Not necessarily. But again, the context matters. Are they in a school or are they at home?
Right.
Okay. So are they allowed to like have a break and, see in a home environment, you could do that. In a school environment.
But it's also you think of like the gifted kids. Yeah. Who are now, with collaborative learning. They're in with the special ed kids. So their well-being no longer matters because they have to give their knowledge to help another child. They are never challenged or cared about because all doesn't mean all. And so like children like my daughter who were never challenged, she was depressed because she was bored. And so extremely bright children, they don't matter. And they're never challenged. And so, but their mental health doesn't matter. It's like.
Also remember with every single one of these principles, we have found words that can be defined many different ways. So it's really important every time that we present something to you, this show or any other show, I want parents to start looking at these words. And if you don't know exactly how they mean it, if you're not 100% sure that their definition of the word is the same as yours, take, for example, emotional well-being. What is that? How do they define that? What do they mean? How do they quantify it?
Belonging.
It matters. You can't have a principle. Principle is like the base of everything. Okay. You can't say that something is a principle if you can't reduce it to a point where anybody off the street understands what you're talking about.
Correct.
So this right away, I got problems. Expectations for classroom conduct and social interaction are learned and can be taught using proven principles of behavior and effective classroom instruction. Word salad on
proven by who? Castle is because Castle says. Like that's what like
what in the world does this even mean? Expectations are learned and can be taught using proven principle. What are proven principles? Of behavior and effective classroom instruction. What is effective? What do you mean by classroom instruction? What kinds of conduct and so what are you freaking talking about? And yet it's a principle. Effective classroom management is based on setting and communicating high expectations, consistently nurturing positive relationships, and providing a high level of student support. What's missing? Anyone? What's missing? What's missing? Consequences for not behaving. Consequences for not meeting the expectations. Consequences for not having an effective relationship.
Consequences are evil.
Consequences.
They're evil.
For either
They're bad.
side. Not just the student, but the teacher as well. No consequences. So classroom management without some kind of checks and balances or consequences is no management at all. Formative and summative assessments are both important and useful, but require different approaches and interpretations. Again, meaningless. I have no idea what you're talking about.
All I hear is assessments, and all I see is data.
Student skills, knowledge, and abilities are best measured with assessment processes grounded in psychological science, as with well-defined standards for quality and fair. What the frick is fairness? And what are well-defined standards for quality? Again, we're getting more and more vague.
Evidence-based skills assessment. I see social emotional learning, data, evidence-based, and equity is how I read that.
Making sense of assessment data depends on clear, appropriate, and fair interpretation. Notice they've used fair now twice, and we don't know what fair means. We don't know what fair means. So is it okay if we go straight from here to the ASCA ones?
Yeah. Okay. The ASCA one is,
because the ASCA one, is it in here somewhere?
No, it's a separate one.
Okay, so it's a separate one. I want to.
So that is the Association for School Counselors. The American.
Yes, and I know I have it. I just want to find where it is. The principles. Where are the principles?
Do you want the whole thing or broken down?
Just the 20 principles. I had it. It was like
the
right
framework?
Here. No, the one that says these are 20 principles of for ASCA.
Hold on.
We had it before.
Why don't you pull up their positions?
I got it. Top 20 principles. Okay. No, that was the psychological one.
Yeah. So go to either the framework or their positions. But I think the framework should go first, at least the first page of it. I sent to you in the private chat.
Okay.
So I was reading.
This is what I mean. Like, bear with us.
I was researching, and I found this position statement letter, submitted to the powers that be, the NOS, as Jeff called it today. And I found this statement, and this is from the social workers. This would be from the school psychologists, the school counselors, the resource officers, the elementary school principals, and the secondary principals came up with this framework. And if you click on the pretty picture, it should open it up for you. Yeah.
Okay, so I've got to let me open that specific document. Hold on. Oh boy. There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So, and you can see who it's from. But the most important part, the first page is really all you have to get through. Can you zoom in? So it says, it's a joint statement. Efforts to improve school climate, safety, and learning are not separate endeavors. They must be designed, funded, and implemented as a comprehensive school-wide approach that facilitates interdisciplinary collaboration and builds a multi-tiered system of support. So that's the MTSS. And then it goes into not to arm, but don't arm the school personnel. They repeated "don't arm the school personnel" like 18 times in this document.
Right, no guns. They don't want any guns.
No guns. I mean, like in random places, it was like, but let us remind you, no guns. And then it breaks it, like the fact that it was a unified statement. You see, evidence-based, like allowed for blended, flexible use of funding streams. This is back up under the first policy recommendation. Blended, flexible use of funding streams in education and mental health services.
But even look at this one. Okay, let's take a look at just this. Improve access to school-based mental health supports by ensuring adequate staffing levels in terms of school-employed mental health professionals who are trained to infuse prevention and intervention services into the learning process and to help integrate services provided through school community partnerships into existing initiatives. This whole thing right here lays the groundwork for the community school.
But look above it, right above it, school community Collaboration.
Can I show that video? I have it.
Yeah.
Can I show it?
Yeah.
Oh, you guys. Oh, this is gonna blow. I think it'll blow your mind, because I saw this the other day and I was so creeped out. Let me close this down.
So some states have what's called communities in schools. That's what like Virginia has. Or in some places have community schools. They're the same thing. Just to so if you don't know that your state has it, look up communities in schools. Like I've talked to Kelly and Lisa, but it's the same thing. Like SEL all day, mental health all day, and it's embedded into your actual school that your kid goes to. Is the way it is here.
This is really important. Okay, I'm going to play this, and just listen to it and tell me if you find it as creepy as I do.
It's called shared leadership, driven by each community in a groundbreaking setting, California's community schools, where parents and families, students and educators make decisions as one, creating the school and shaping futures together, based on the needs of their students, steeped in local culture, curriculum from cybersecurity to gardening, and assisting families with their needs, wellness centers, food pantries, and parental education. California's community schools, reimagining public education.
So, there's that. I mean, somebody said
pretty convinced.
Communism, and I'm like, yeah.
Here, I'm going to send you, hold on. We'll see. So this would be communities in schools. The other one that's circling around Virginia and I think North Carolina too. It's the same thing. But it's in the chat, I think.
Okay, it's another one of those videos. Oh no, it's this. Okay. We're building. Oh yeah, this is these guys. These are so gross.
Just so you know, that's not just California. Like, is what I always do is I look to other states. I saw community schools, and then I looked in Virginia, and I was like, well, what's communities in schools? Well, let me call the person who's the community schools person that I know, and we talked about it. It's
right,
and so
we're building a powerful change movement.
The mothers of downtown New Orleans screaming at a child as she entered the William Franz Elementary School.
I want to be really frank. Public schools are built on a cracked foundation. It was not built for us. Public education has systemic flaws that have tragic outcomes for the lives of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and students who are living in poverty. The hope for public education really is that we level the playing field for all students. And Communities in Schools has been fighting for school equity for over 4 decades. This past year,
does that look like school?
Public health, racial justice, economic.
I'm sorry. Wait. What? This is school. Are we still talking about school?
Is not an option.
Every division has one.
We are calling.
Look, if you're in Virginia,
shift the conversation.
You have them.
To focus on student re-engagement, creating equitable learning environments, and in creating a school climate that benefits and supports all students. Communities in schools.
I've yet to see schooling. I'm seeing eating, walking, transporting, getting healthcare, getting hugs, getting food, more food. Here's some more food.
Shelter and clothing.
And clothing. Lots of this is we're parenting your children.
Deeper needs.
We are literally parenting your children.
This is Arnie Duncan probably, and they're probably there until 9 o'clock at night.
Our site coordinator.
1999, this was founded in here.
We walk by their side. Where's mom and dad? Where are their parents?
We are not trying to save or rescue students. Students have an inherent ability and talent that we help them uncover. Inside schools, our site coordinators push against systems to really stand up to systemic racism within the institutions that our students are confronting.
I do believe that the work that
California
I do as a site coordinator does help make our school more equitable.
Well, Lord knows that's the most important thing is we want a more equitable school, not a school where the kids actually learn to read or do math, but it's more equitable.
CIS was such an extraordinary partner to me.
Oh, there he is!
Artie Duncan.
It's never been more
I've
important
never
than it is
seen this
today.
before.
They have organizations like CIS that have a national footprint.
There you go, guys.
Provide real, not just academic or educational, but real moral leadership.
We believe that communities in schools should be a leading voice on this issue. With over 40 years of experience working inside schools,
Barbara.
I know communities in schools works because it worked for me. I'm the first to graduate from my family from college, and today, as a product of the program, now lead as the president and CEO of Communities in Schools.
Oh, and why am I not surprised?
Everyone,
I
the
can't.
time
I
is
can't.
All right. Okay. How do I stop this?
The future
Let's
of our
make it
country.
stop. It's too much.
This is what I've been telling people. Like, California knows they're California. The problem with Virginia, is that we don't know we are California. We just don't know it. Like, I would rather know I'm California than have this.
Right.
19 districts, 127 schools in Virginia, just in Virginia. And Arnie told you how many states it's in with that picture. So just right there, what you don't know. So
community schools, what's called the WISC model, is what's coming. I mean, the Secretary of Education, Cardona, is all over this. This is what you get with this administration. This is what you get, period. It's not like the Republicans are going to get rid of it. It's not like, don't think that you can elect a different president and they're going to go, yeah, this is bad. They're not going to do that.
Keep in mind, 1999. This
has been coming for a long time. This guy was a product of communities in schools, and now he's the CEO of communities in schools. So this is not a Democrat-Republican thing. This is a people who refuse to face the reality that state-run school, the government school, is inherently a conflict of interest with the nuclear family, and that they are creeping closer and closer and closer. They're going to be in your bedroom. There's going to be a freaking dormitory pretty soon. And if you want to continue to have sort of some integrity to your family, where you're the one feeding your kids, you're the one deciding where they go to the doctor, what medicine they're on. Because when this exists in the school, and equity is the primary goal, do you think you're going to be permitted to say, I don't want to use those services. I want to feed my kid something else. I want my kid to go to a different doctor. Well, there goes your equity, doesn't it? Now you've got something bigger and better than all the other kids, and we just can't have that. So they'll come up with new and creative ways to prevent you from doing that, namely diagnosing your kid with something that they need to monitor, and that if you're doing it outside of there, you're going to have two choices. Report back to them so that they can be sure that you're really taking proper care of your child, or don't. You let them do it. Those are going to be your choices.
And if you
Screw
don't,
HIPAA,
go buy
HIPAA. You know how
if
now
you
when you
don't-
fill out the health forms to say my kid has this and my kid has that and my kid went to the doctor, that health form is going to get thicker and thicker and thicker and have all this mental health stuff. And there'll be somebody in the school go, well, our school counselors have identified that little Johnny has some problems with his, individuality, and he's a little too oppositional to authority. So I don't notice that your doctor is checking into that. So are you denying them care?
Okay, then we're going to have to come have home visits, and
we're going to tell the social worker to stop by.
Yeah, and then you're going to have to sign a wellness plan, and if you don't live up to this, then we're going to take your kids. Welcome to the future, people. This is what I've been screaming with my CPS child sex trafficking background. You think I'm kidding? Wait around until you get at your door, because that's how mad it makes me. Because
no, not kidding.
Oh, and you have in North Carolina, you have 18 affiliates across your state in North Carolina.
Oh, yay. So anyway, back to our little framework for this is an ASCA even. This is which one is this?
This is the family, as they call themselves here in Virginia.
Oh, so look, I want you guys to know all these names, so you don't feel like, oh, ours is NASP. It's not ASCA. Doesn't matter. Look, here they are.
Because you have the Virginia Association or the North Carolina Association, just like the VSBA, the school boards, and the VEA, same thing. Like, just because it's national just changed it to put a letter of wherever you live in front of it.
That's it. All right. So, employ effective positive school discipline that functions in concert with efforts to address school safety and climate. It's not simply punitive. It is clear, consistent, and equitable. What does that mean? What is clear? What is consistent? What is equitable? We don't know. Reinforces
Restorative
positive
practices.
behaviors. What are positive behaviors? Care to list some? I'd like to know. Using security personnel or SROs primarily as a substitute for effective discipline policies does not contribute to school safety and can perpetuate the school to prison pipeline. Lies.
Yes.
Lies.
Yes.
You know what perpetuates the school to prison pipeline?
No
You know what does
discipline.
that? Not just no discipline at all, but lack of literacy. Nothing contributes to the school to prison pipeline more than lack of literacy. 70% of our prison population is illiterate. And then we spend, as Dr. Teresa Sanders has reminded us many times on this channel, we spend gobs of taxpayer dollars teaching them to read in prison. We hire contractors who come in and teach them to read because they weren't taught to read in schools and they had no hope and they had no opportunities. And it has nothing to do with because the society and this and that was not equitable. But if you don't teach the kids to read, if you're so busy working on making sure they have the proper kind of sandwich and
equity will never work. Okay. So you have you can't ever have equal outcomes. And so they're going to get pushed through or dumbed down. And this is why I tell people, who cares what the damn diploma rate is if they're not educated? Like our diploma rate went up. Bravo. They can't read. Yeah, exactly. But another thing
you graduated, you know nothing, but you graduated.
Correct. We're looking at the wrong thing. But is the discipline piece too, is that we have PBIS 99 was our pilot year. Our worst performing schools with the worst behavior, still even worse behaving, is discipline is needed, and it's not bad. Like I tried to opt my kid in for due dates and discipline last year. I couldn't even do that.
So the next thing I do want to show, if it's okay with you, is I want to show some of the things that they put out, that ASCA puts out.
Oh yeah.
We keep going back to ASCA because they've been some of the most outspoken about what school counselors should do, and they are the school counselor specifically association.
They're not guidance anymore.
They're not guidance. They're actual counselors. Now, it's very important for you to understand that just because it has counselor in the name, they're not clinicians.
No,
they are not licensed clinicians. Please,
they're not licensed to do group therapy.
No,
but they in their documents they say they do it.
That's right,
and they're not licensed. They can maybe do small or one-to-one. They are, and in their documents they say, and I go, they don't. The law is nobody cares anymore. I don't know. They're not licensed to do that. Okay, well we're just going to move on. Thank you for pointing.
But we're doing it anyway.
Right. And then we're going to teach teachers to do it, that they can't do it either.
Yeah. So I wanted to show you guys, this is a Linktree off of their website. So they have a website and we're going to show you some stuff, but they have this Linktree. And look at some of the names of the links. You know, they have posters. They have the school counselor and transgender and non-binary youth. That's like number 2 up here. It's actually their first priority of topics. The school counselor and LGBTQ youth is there. I'm sorry, there's a difference. They have 2 separate links.
Mm-hmm.
The school counselor and anti-racist practices, school counselor roles and ratios, the school counselor and social emotional development. I strongly recommend the audience goes to their website and finds this. Here, I'll drop the link.
I'll find it
right
here.
You
can drop a link tree.
In the
I'll
comments.
also find
afterwards, we'll put it in the, if you're watching the replay, it's down there. Let's see, school counselor and social emotional development. So social emotional development is not a separate thing. ASCA ethical standards for school counselors. They're honored. No, I'm kidding.
That's
ASCA student standards, mindsets, behaviors for student success, and their professional standards and competencies. And you really should familiarize yourself with all of these. But let's take a look at just their anti-racist practices. Okay. And remember, these are supposed to be school counselors. Now, while they're not clinicians, they are going to be looking at school climate and mental health and your child individually and all this. And they're supposedly geared towards improving all of those things. But look at the collectivist viewpoint that they're approaching it from. Their basic premise is that Racism remains part of society in the United States and exists throughout all of our institutions. Unfortunately, the education system is a subset of society, has contributed to the continuation of inequities specific to the school setting. So this is the school counselor's role with relation to anti-racism.
Their role, like they're literally telling all the other counselors in every school below them that you don't think they're getting memos. I've read the ones that come out of our new VDOE on this stuff. They're telling, and with webinars.
Yes. And they're saying that they have to reflect regularly on their cultural worldviews to seek to understand how these views influence their practice. In other words, be constantly critical consciousness, like James Lindsay talks about. They have to be constantly criticizing their own mindset. Engage in the personal work, do the work necessary to identify and acknowledge blind spots, presumption that they're there. Uncover and mitigate the influence of all biases, particularly implicit biases, which we know is bunk, and so on. So familiarize yourself with this page and you will see it's like Kendiism on steroids. So the school counselor it's this ASCA position is that school counselors work towards cultural competence and engage in anti-racist actions by advocating to change racist policies, procedures, practices, guidelines, and laws, contributing to inequities in student academic, career, and social, emotional development. These are the school counselors.
These are your school counselors. This is just what I was getting ready to say, guys. Like, this is American school counselors teaching all the school counselors. How many schools are in
like
your
if you
division?
thought, you could
schools.
remove a book, we'll remove the CRT books from the library and the CRT will be gone. Oh, you know what? We'll pass a law that says that you can't teach bias, blah, blah, blah in the history class. Oh, and we won't have that. You'll have to teach the Constitution. Oh, that'll solve the problem. Guys, I don't know how many times I have to say it on this channel. It is deeply ingrained in the human pipeline that is associated with education in America. Yes. Counselors, social workers, teachers, administrators, the school board associations, all of them sound exactly like this. There is not a discipline that is not looking at your child and the world through this lens. They are covering their bases. They're just covering their bases. You cannot escape. You cannot opt out. SEL is infused into everything. And then through SEL, the counselors come in and they're observing your child as they go through those little SEL exercises. Are they socially aware? Are they personally responsible? Are they this? Are they that? And then the counselor is the one who's going to identify those problematic behaviors and then refer it to whomever goes next or just recommend testing and diagnostic stuff. So read this, please. The next one, these are the resources that they want them to have. These are the resources, okay? So we have the look at this, professional development, diversity, equity, inclusion specialist, culturally sustaining school counseling specialist, social justice and the ASCA national model, address students' race-based stress and trauma. Race-based.
Struggle sessions is all like.
Yes. Ignite change for equity and inclusion. Every single thing is social justice related, even the trauma work. They claim to be trauma informed. All they're looking for is trauma caused
racial trauma.
by racial oppression trauma. And or being part of a marginalized group.
I spirit murdered your black joy.
That's right. So it's all cultural diversity, blah, 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 blah. Now we go to the school counselor and LGBTQ youth.
Which is different than the trans-binary, but they're different.
Yes. So their position, school counselors promote equal opportunity and respect for students regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. School counselors recognize the school experience can be significantly more difficult for students with marginalized identity. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. They are celebrated every freaking day. This is so annoying. School counselors work to eliminate barriers impeding their student development and achievement. There's nothing impeding their achievement. There's nobody saying, oh, we're going to make it so you can't read that book or learn that math or do that science because you're whatever you are. No, That's not happening. And to
They're
the
getting
extent that they
rewarded,
are in a
period.
bad mood, or they're sad, or they're getting bullied because of their differences, and that's affecting their achievement, that's a separate problem. It's that they're getting bullied. But kids get bullied for all sorts of things. There's not some unique special, we got to pay special extra attention to these victims of bullying, because now you're leaving other victims of bullying out of the mix. Like, they don't count.
Remember, there has to be a power imbalance. By definition.
Right, we have to have, you can't have bullying unless there's a power imbalance. I'm so sorry, I keep forgetting.
Or perceived.
Right. So to learn more about ASCA and their
God.
crazy lunacy,
We need to
please
go behind
visit.
closed doors.
Yes, please visit our friends at Courage is a Habit. What?
I'm
What?
just like, I'm looking at the next one we're going to bring up, and I hadn't read something yet. So
Okay. So, you know, this is the kind of stuff that they put on. Okay. This is a quote. It is an expectation, not the exception, for school counselors to integrate multiculturalism and social justice perspectives into their work as advocates and leaders. It's an expectation. Anti-racism starts with us. Become an LGBTQ inclusive school. Legal and ethical considerations. Equity and action through success. These are the frontline activists in your school. So if you thought this was improving mental health, chances are it's doing the exact opposite.
Yep.
It is doing the exact opposite. They actually claim, they admit that they are manipulators. They instruct their counselors to work through critical race theory lens. Okay. They support school counselors hiding birth control treatment from their parents and claim that parental rights erase children. That your parental rights erase your children.
Did they all go to the UN child rights conference? Like, is that? But keep in mind, guys, too, that these people too, like Gavin Grimm, like the Grimm case, was their keynote speaker last year. Like that. I like.
So tell them who Gavin Grimm is, for those who don't know.
I'm lucky enough. So that would be the Supreme Court case that everybody uses, and that's from Gloucester, Virginia, in the middle of nowhere, about an hour from me, that got paid, I don't even know, like some millions of dollars and he's the one that the whole transgender lawsuit thing. But if you know things like Roe v. Wade is not constitutional because it's not in the 9th and 10th Amendment, I'm like, well, when are we going to overturn that? Because it doesn't go to the Supreme Court. It goes to the state, not the Supreme Court. But anyway, That's Gavin Grimm. Well, the Grimm case, if you hear about it.
And here's something else, that these school counselors take the official position, same as the DSM, that gender identity is one's innermost concept of self, as male or female, a blend of both or neither, etc. One's gender identity can be the same or different from their sex assigned at birth. Everyone has a gender identity. Only individuals can determine their own gender identity. So they actually are, you know, believing this concept of innermost sense of self, as opposed to I just am. I just am. I don't have it. I don't have an innermost sense of self that I'm female. I never did. I just am female. So I didn't stop and go, am I female? No, the vast majority of humans
but
do
imagine
not even
if somebody
ask
had
themselves
constantly,
that question.
Imagine the course of your life if somebody had constantly been.
Are you sure you're female? Are you sure you're female? Are you sure you're female?
Today you're wearing pants?
Is that your innermost sense of self? Do you know what it is like? And then,
sure?
Of course, if you're a little kid and you look around at bigger females, older females, they have breasts, they have this, they have that, whatever. And you're like, well, I'm not like them. And I don't feel like I want to even look like them. And I don't even feel like anything is in common with this. And I don't understand. Then you might conclude incorrectly that you don't have an innermost sense of self as a female, because no one has made it clear to you that there are literally limitless ways to perceive that.
Correct.
And none of us heretofore have sat down and thought about it much.
Correct.
Okay. That is different. Having this innermost sense of self is very different than saying, I wish I didn't have the body that I have. That's a completely separate thing. That's a separate thing. That's been around since forever. Okay. But this concept that you have this innermost sense of self of that is gendered, you have a gendered soul and all this, that is new. Well, I shouldn't say it's new. It's Gnostic. It's been around for a long time, but it's new in our Western consciousness in terms of being a mainstream idea. This is not, if you asked somebody 10 years ago, they would have been like, what?
for parents, okay, because I'm deep in this like trench here and trying to, even though I want to run and hide and put my head back in the sand, but is that you have to understand is that if you take them the law, you can't talk to they're going to tell you the law doesn't exist. You are wrong. You're a bad parent. They're going to shame you. They're going to have struggle sessions with you. They're going to challenge you. They're going to threaten you. They're going to, and this is what is that you stick your heels in the ground and you be the parent for your child. You be the iron wall. I don't care. I will call the sheriff for you. You're not doing this to my kid. You are the parent. And that, like, I cannot emphasize that enough to everybody in this state, everybody in this nation, is they are not your kids' parents. And if you let them tell you they are, you're done. You're done. You might as well just give them on over and let the lunatics raise your kid if you're going to let them tell you anything they're going to do with your kid, period.
And this has changed. It says here in 1998, they were supposed to refrain from consciously encouraging the counselee's acceptance of values, lifestyles, plans, decisions, and beliefs that represent the counselor's personal orientation. That was in the ethical consideration then, but it is not that way anymore at all. Now they explicitly do. They explicitly say, look at all this stuff. Black Lives Matter, white privilege, blah, 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 blah. So you know what I want to show, since you just got done talking about you're the parent, I want to show those documents that your friend sent us.
Yes.
Because that is as clear a piece of evidence that even when a parent is involved, they will give different information. So I'm trying to get all the documents that pertain to that up front.
So this is kind of, if you guys watched Deb and I a year ago, we did with Lisa, we did the SEL's Evil Twin, and we talked about Panorama and DESA. And about because Committee for Children, which is the nonprofit, then it's the for-profit Second Step, which is the most notorious of social emotional learning. In 2014, they said, well, you can't teach skills if you don't assess them. So I went down that rabbit hole and found, people know about Panorama, but they're like, what does it do? Well, that's a data dashboard, just like all your kids have dashboards. And it's all of these soft skills, non-cognitive, also known as the 5 competencies, the castle wheel. And that's what they're constantly assessing on your kids. And hi, honey. And so down that rabbit hole a year later, hi, go with Sissy. I'll be done in a minute. Go. I know you want to be a superstar. So it gets even worse because this is a friend of mine, and her daughter has an IEP, and she has to do different kind of assessments. And so the school sent her this letter after a meeting where they had to do one of these. This was the BAS, the BASC, or the BESS, because there's a whole list like SSIS, Collab. I can post all of them that come from Pearson, and these are all APA approved screeners of your kids. And so she got
because
a letter.
Of the IEP, that when your child has an IEP, it's, a lot of parents think, oh, I'll get my kid an IEP or a 504 and they'll get lots more attention and that'll be good. So we need a diagnosis so that my kid can get all this extra special attention. It's not so very good. First of all,
but also with Medicaid coming in now.
Yeah.
Jillian Balow, before she quit 2 months ago here in Virginia, said, we're going to use special education children so all children have an IEP. So it's things like that you're like, and that's because of Medicaid, is that, so this is like amped up version of what is being done on all children. So this is like the extreme version. But when we talk about the data that's being collected on kids, it's not just SEL. SEL is a problem for their brain, but the numbers of what you're going to see, that's going to follow like what that's going to do for the rest of their lives. And the most interesting thing is that in researching the BASC, the BASC-3, is, you know where most of the research is out of? China. So China's been doing, and China has a what? Social credit score. Right. And so when you think about it like that, and we've been saying because in Virginia, this stuff sits around 75 years
Same
post-graduation.
here. Same everywhere.
Generational social credit score, EQ over IQ. So this, go ahead.
Yeah. So this is that. Let's take a look at this. This is okay. So Woodcock-Johnson test of achievement is a pretty standard test that even homeschoolers use to get their kids tested with a standardized test each year to see how they're doing. And the examiner usually, meets with the child, talks to the child. And now reading through this is a, how old?
12-year-old.
She's 12 years old. Okay. So, 6th
She was
grade?
11 when this was done. Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about a 6th grader, and we're, looking at this and reading through it and everything. It says throughout testing session, she was extremely polite and cooperative. She did not display any negative signs of frustration. Blah, blah, wore mask. Examiner thoroughly enjoyed working and conversing with the child. So this shows nothing to worry about. Like, I'm reading these observations. There's nothing here as a parent and even a person who's read these assessments many times. I'm like, this sounds like a typical 12-year-old kid. Okay. Nothing to write home about. Then, I think I have to continue to choose my next screen. I have to go find the documents, because there are many here. So the next thing is which one? The one that
the next
shows...
two is not really that important. It's like a basic, like her IQ, like her,
it's like you have things like this. This is like a Wechsler abbreviated scale of intelligence. Okay, so she's got like superior, high, average, and spirit. This is a very smart kid, like in terms of these scores, verbal. These are very high. This is not.
She's just moderately. She's extremely dyslexic because the school refused to evaluate her despite her mother begging them for 3 years.
Right. These are very, very high scores. And then we've got above average, and average down here in these scales. And then we have the comprehensive test of fundamental processing. Okay, so here we're getting into the dyslexia stuff. So let me go to the next one. But so far you're looking at this and you're like, okay, this is a very bright child, very polite, bright child. There's nothing, scary here. These are more stuff about dyslexia. We have average. This is pretty typical again for somebody with dyslexia.
My friend was like, now keep in mind, she got the letter and then the other ones were buried in the bottom. Like, it wasn't even like C PDFs or C attachments. She just happened to. And so she was like, okay, she clicked on the first two. And then when she got to the next ones, she was like, what in the holy F is this?
Right. So this is where the rubber meets the road. We get into this. It's like a behavior assessment.
Can you zoom in?
I'm trying to figure out how to zoom
up
in
at the top. Do you have like the lens that says?
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to find where the actual document is, because it's pulling it up. It's open somewhere in my screens, but I have so many screens open and I'm like having trouble.
Oh, what do you mean pull it up? Okay.
Hold on a second. Here we go. Okay, let's see if this works.
There we go. All right.
It's kind of.
So the first one. So the mother. This is the BASC 3. If you want more information, look up BASC, BESS, and that's going to be the general screener that all the same people are giving all children. And so the first column is going to be the mother took it, and the questions are the general ones like, does the child, do nice things, the general questions of, and sometimes never, likely, more likely, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so you see the mom's descriptor, her general ed teachers, and then the special ed teachers.
Right.
And, but it's things like, you're assessing my kid on what? And it gets extremely disturbing.
Right. So like up here is mostly, look at this. The mom assessed the child as far as like ADHD probabilities of average. The general ed teacher says at risk. And the special ed teacher says, look at this, 74 as compared to 56. Clinically significant. Autism probability, same thing. The mom's answers, that doesn't seem to be indicated. And based on what I read in that description of the Woodcock-Johnson, that is what?
I know that little girl.
There's no way that's not describing a kid on the spectrum. And here we've got both teachers saying at risk. And then we've got functional impairment. Look at all the at-risk, elevated, extremely elevated. The teachers are pathologizing the living daylights out of this little girl, and the parent who spends the most, well, might say she doesn't spend the most time because the kid's at school, but remember, they're not taking into account the school environment. They're not taking into account that the special ed teacher might be a complete, you know what? They're not taking into account of kids getting bullied at school, bored at school.
But the gen ed teachers are just that, gen ed teachers, and they have no business.
Why is a gen ed teacher evaluating this kid like really at all? Certainly, without the parent being able to see their answers. Well, now they see the answers. And
they do it every day. I mean,
yeah,
whether it's DSA or...
look as we get down to
oh my God,
schizophrenia, thought disorders.
Schizophrenia. Y'all, I'm not even kidding. This girl that now has, look, her mother, and then it has at risk, clinically significant for schizophrenia at 11 years old.
Inappropriate behavior and feelings. Now, the mom is sitting here saying at risk, so you might say, well, mom's, like covering for her kid or whatever. Blah, 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 blah. Believe it or not, that actually doesn't typically happen. Very often, the only type of parent that does that is one who's like afraid of stigma or whatever. But generally speaking, parents want to know the truth about their kids, and they answer fairly honestly. It is bizarre to see these responses from the teachers. Absolutely bizarre. But because even the special ed teacher doesn't see the kid for 8 hours a day.
But is the mind-boggling part of me is from these questions, like then you think about who's filling these out. And then what I've always said is, I've asked teachers, do you know what this is doing on a kid? And I to show them, and they're like, but it's like, where in the world do you get their likelihood?
The scale is so subjective. Sometimes, never, always, this kind of stuff. And when you're talking about some of the things that they're evaluating, they might spend this special ed teacher might spend a couple hours a week with this child. The gen ed teacher at 6th grade, they go from class to class. Which teacher is it? Is it the homeroom teacher? Like the mom who knows the kid best. And like I said, whoever wrote the original letter, that original letter does not compute with these numbers at all. At all. If you had a kid with at risk, clinically significant, all of this stuff that's down here, elevated, clinically significant, the person who did the original examination would have been like, this kid's got issues, because they spend the most time with the child and during the evaluation, and they do more objective exercises. In other words, they're not just observing with a little scale. They're not using a basque. When the person does a Woodcock-Johnson, there are little tests. There are little exercises the kid does. They play with blocks. They answer questions. They draw. They write. They do all kinds of things. That examiner spends probably 10 times more time with the kid than this person sits with a piece of paper and goes, yeah, no, yeah, no.
Let me read you some of the questions that determined if that child was schizophrenic. Okay. Plans well, has panic attacks, and these are never, sometimes, often, always. Accepts people who are different than his or herself. Seems lonely.
There it is.
Puts others down. Is afraid of getting sick. Has a short attention span. Is creative. Breaks the rules. Reacts negatively. Tracks down information when needed. Complains of pain. Deceives others. Avoids making friends. Is fearful. Okay, there's 60, just like that. 3-word questions. And is clear when telling people about personal experiences. Like, that's literally the depth of the questions. How in the world do you get something like that to say that a child is extremely for schizophrenia? And what did you say before?
Thought disorders.
What did you say about schizophrenia? An 11-year-old? Who in the world?
Well, first of all, schizophrenia doesn't present the vast majority of time until early adulthood. That's not to say that the person doesn't manifest any kind of strangeness before that. I'm just saying that usually anybody trying to assess a 12-year-old for it's somebody in the audience who's is a psychotherapist can probably, say more than I can, but it's been my understanding that is wildly premature to even speculate about. They don't even particularly like to diagnose children with bipolar disorder.
Right.
And you really have to show some clinically significant,
and it's usually with
long-term
some kind
patterns
of
of
comorbidity.
behavior.
I mean, it's not like,
yeah,
but much less like this.
Yeah, it's just 12 years old is really early, and what they're doing to this child is setting this child up to have more scrutiny and more surveillance and more diagnoses. And what is bizarre is that the kid is really, really smart.
Mhm.
So that's not to say that people with these mental illnesses can't be smart. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is I'm wondering if this is a case of clipping the tall poppies. In other words, if we pathologize the really
EQ
bright
over IQ.
child, if we
That's what I
pathologize
see.
the really bright child, and we put them into this box, and these hypocrites, these people with the principles of, well, what we think about the child and what the child thinks about themselves is going to affect their learning. Well, don't you think they might end up with a slightly negative self-perception if you do this to them and this goes in their record? And teachers see this and start treating them like this, or God forbid, somebody else goes, I think you need some medication. And the parent is none the wiser. He goes, my child needs medication. Oh, yes, they need medication. This is going to help them learn better. But
And
why? Well, their VASC results
she
were
also
this.
found out that because that through filing a FOIA, that this information had been in the hands of like 95 people in the county, because she's trying to go through different processes for other stuff. And some of them included like people she knew, like, and so that's what we're talking about. Like, when we talk about where is all this data going, like literally, and what is it doing? Because you talk about clipping the poppies, I hear EQ over IQ. She's extremely bright, but in 10 years, when she goes to go to wherever she wants to do, she's brilliant. Oh, well, you know what? You don't have any proper, this, that, and the other. It doesn't matter that you're brilliant. You could create rocket ships or whatever.
Exactly.
You don't have great, how many like astrophysicists were great people? I mean, I think about like they were the people that did not have people skills, but they still did amazing things.
Well,
like,
there's no question that with this focus on social justice and the emphasis on, like all these, white guilt and all that other stuff, that they're trying to emphasize that EQ, and they're trying to pathologize people who are not people. It's either personality can now be a disorder. And I don't mean a personality disorder. I mean, you have a personality that's anti-authoritarian. You're an independent thinker. You don't go with the flow. You're nonconformist. Right.
Think about what had been done. I'm a high D nonconformist. Like, I just wonder what they would, if this was 30 years ago, like what they would have done to me.
They're same. I mean, I don't even want to think about what would have happened to me between the gender stuff and my being a tomboy and what they're doing to kids with this. But we just wanted to show you guys like what can happen with this type of stuff. That once this counseling is coming in the school, these community schools with the health centers, whatever, they make it look so nice in the video. They make it look like, oh, one-stop shop. I don't have to leave work and take my kid to the doctor. And if my kid is having mood, issues and this and that, oh, they'll diagnose it and they'll take care of it and they'll give my kid the counseling they need and they'll have access to care. Except nobody stops and thinks like, are they the right people to be doing this in the first place? And if so, why? And if you think so, are you aware that they come to it with a point of view? They come to it with an agenda. They come to it with an ideology. Are you okay with your child being seen by some kind of a counselor or a psychologist who has a very specific ideological point of view? Right. Because I'm not. Like, I want that 1998 version of the person who says I'm supposed to be neutral and I'm not supposed to project, and it is completely outside the bounds of my ethical code to be, doing what we've just seen happen to this girl.
They have position statements, and that's what I keep telling people. These are not opinions. Like, we have attorney generals issuing opinions, but we have nothing but clubs of people who say that they are the authority, giving position statements, which is essentially our thumb on all 50 states that are you're a part of this. Then this is what you're going. This is now your position.
Exactly.
And I mean, is got this as a parent.
There's no independence even within it. Like, so they're
that's
all.
Where your school will look at you and go,
yeah, they're educated the same way, and it's in the sauce. Like, you can't say, well, my school or that school or the other school. No, it's in the way that they're educated. It's in their associations, their professional development, all of it. You had sent me this thing about nonconformers need better social skills. I want to open that up because that's like a new thing too, that they're all gung ho
well, if
about.
you look up, so I was on Psychology Today. Let me see if I can find it. And so conformity was the first thing that I started with, and is that the force to conform, which is where normal becomes abnormal, used to create what they'll say mentally unhealthy children, the force to conform. Well, now conformity is how you create, of course, in the community, that's how you create. I'll find it real quick and send it to you.
Here,
that's
I've got it here. Conformity. This says, let's see if this is the right one. Okay. Yeah. Conformity is typically motivated by a person's identification. This is in Psychology Today. With a specific group. In theory, to be truly accepted as a member, an individual must adopt the norms and rules that govern the group's behavior. These actions may at first differ from their own personal values. In time, however, the individual's underlying beliefs and attitudes may begin to shift as the opinions and behaviors of the group become ingrained and automatic. And a healthy amount of conformity can lead to increased social harmony on both. They don't tell us what a healthy amount is. On both interpersonal and societal levels. For instance, a society in which all members collectively agree to conform to certain driving driving, blah, 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 will experience fewer traffic accidents. Okay. So what, and then I'm not saying that they're wrong and that a certain amount of conformity, but they don't tell us what a healthy amount is. And our kids are coming under so much pressure to, you heard one of the comments in the Basque test, one of the testing things was accepts people different from them. Well, what does that mean? How are they evaluating that? How are they evaluating what different is? How are they defining accepts? Because what I've observed is that if your child chooses friends that share their interests, and as a consequence, they don't have a lot of friends from marginalized groups. And it just, even, and this is going to be especially likely in a school district.
So a climate survey, it'll say, how often do you play with or interact with children from a different whatever? And that's data that's going to be collected. And it doesn't take into account what division this is, how many are in your school or in your class. And is that it's all, none of it makes any, like, I went to a high school that there were 3 people that were not white that graduated with me. But
the bottom line was in America, as long as you're not being mean, like as long as you're not bullying,
there was not one part of me that
we have freedom of association. If you go to an integrated school, look, come on, we've all seen it. You go to a school, it's diverse, but you go into the lunchroom, who's sitting with whom? Who's sitting? The affinity groups, they form organically. Now, in recent years, they've been getting more integrated, they've been organically integrated. And that's swell. That's awesome. That's fantastic.
But never hate. Like there was never.
It wasn't hate. It was like, I'm sitting with my friends who live in my neighborhood and I'm sitting with my friends on the soccer team and I'm sitting, whatever. And it may have broken out that, but it wasn't like I'm sitting here because I don't want to sit with people who look like that.
Right.
There was more of that when it was, I don't want to sit with the weird kids, or I don't want to sit with the band kids, or I don't want to sit with the whatever, the math geeks. And that's different. But we don't know if they're talking about differences like that, like she's a jock and they're the math geeks and then she doesn't like them for whatever reason, or if it's all her friends appear to be white, therefore she doesn't like people who are different from her.
Right.
And I'm so skeptical because I've seen it happen. I've seen in the, in workplaces, I've seen adults be treated like that. Like, why don't you go to lunch with the other people? It's like, I don't purposely not go to lunch with them. It's just, these are my friends from over here. And by the way, our workplace is already like 90% white. So it's not, I'd have to like go out of my way. I'm not trying to avoid those people.
Or if ridiculous. You just like to have quiet time by yourself.
Oh, well, then you're just weird.
Then have social anxiety disorder? Would you then be pathologized as being like shyness? You now have another disorder. Like,
exactly. So the equity that they seem to be focused on is making sure everybody has a diagnosis. And I should say making sure. They seem really keen to find these things wrong, because if you have a mom who says, average, nothing's wrong, whatever, and then you've got the special ed teacher describing the kid as possibly a future schizophrenic, something's seriously wrong with that, with the diagnostic criteria and with the whole evaluation process. Something is seriously wrong.
Even if it's something like they're aggressive, like even if it's not so much like a coded pathology, like your child's data on these screeners on their likelihood of like aggression or things like that, like that will follow them if it's not schizophrenia. Like,
well, and to your point, one of the things that the DSM V edits did is it eliminated mood disorders, which is in many ways a good thing. And it changed the criteria for it, or created this new thing about a kind of a violent, I can't remember what they called it. Opposition. It's not oppositional defiant disorder.
Conduct disorder.
No, but anyway, it's sort of like what oppositional defiant disorder used to be, whatever, but it's something like that. But they did say, to their credit, that it had to be 6 months without a period of calm. In other words, you couldn't have a period of calm that occurred anywhere within that time, or within a 3-month period, but within a broader 6-month period of consistent violent behavior, like physically violent. And the example they gave is in this video that I watched about it. Kid gets pushed out of line in the lunchroom, or somebody cuts them in line. Most kids would just be like, "Hey, what are you doing?" or blah, 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 or just push them back into whatever. They deal with it. The kid with this particular disorder grabs him by this shirt, throws them on the ground, and begins pummeling their face. It doesn't stop until someone pulls them apart. Okay. And that is not just a one-off. That happens again and again and again. And they're coming, and the teachers are afraid of this kid. Okay. This is what this
you're talking about the explosive, whatever it's called.
It's something like that. But they did change that, and they made it so that you had to have a pretty long period of time. Here's the problem, though. That's the DSM. You're many steps removed by the time you get to school counselor. And you're then further steps removed by the time you get to gen ed teacher. And what we're seeing happen this is anecdotal, but you can go talk amongst your friends, and I bet you'll find it too, is we're seeing these people who have access to diagnostic tools, systems to collect data where they can input data that lasts forever. You don't know it's there and you can't get it out, where they are classifying your kid as having these things without meeting the diagnostic criteria. So we can only blame the DSM-5 so far. We can only go so far with that, because they're going to put out this tool, and I hate what they've done to gender dysphoria. Okay. But they can put out this tool, and first of all, it's not the Bible. They don't even have to use it. There are clinicians who are not using it because they don't like some of its definitions. They don't like what it's done. But in this school, they are using it. And these counselors are trained on it, but they're trained to be like almost like it's okay for you to decide that what the criteria are. and nobody is holding them accountable. If you parents don't go back and say, this isn't a 6-month pattern, or you didn't go back to the time when my child was, this age and get a history. You didn't follow this. But if you don't know what it is, and you didn't go read the DSM V, and then you didn't go hold their feet to the fire, and you're not even aware that it's happening because it's winding up in their file. And next thing you know, they come into you going, your kid needs to be on medication. Why? Well, your kid has this blah, blah, blah disorder. How do you know that?
They reinstated the unspecified mood disorder that they got rid of in DSM V, and then they brought it back to unspecified diagnosis for the DSM V TR, reverted to the unspecified diagnosis.
They got rid of mood disorders.
They got rid of that, but they brought it back in a form, an unspecified diagnosis, to include a range of possible mood disorders.
So the problem is they got more specific with some things and wildly vague with other things. Yeah. And this is leaving a lot of room for these non-clinician people with their little, more sometimes, maybe never, whatever, to classify your child, diagnose your child, and put your child on a bed. You want to talk about school to prison pipeline? They've got school to mental hospital pipeline, school to psychoactive drug pipeline, school to lifetime as a patient pipeline. And so the reason we bring you these shows is not because we are the foremost experts on all of this. We're not at all. Some of this stuff is over our heads, so we read through it as best we can. But the takeaway here ought to be, you go read it. Don't take our word for it. Just only take our word for the fact that this is out there. It is being used. It is being used to diagnose your kids within the confines of the school. You may not know about it. It may end up in some data and later that affects your kid or lands your kid on some medication without you knowing, or maybe transitioned without you knowing. And you've got to be aware of it. Ask why, ask who, and to the extent legally possible, put a roadblock in place so they cannot do this with your kid. School should be about school. It should be about learning those subjects that your child needs to be able to function independently in the world. And it is not a place where they do all things. Right. They are trying to do things to and for your child they have no business doing. They're trying to replace you. And you to be the one to decide your kid has an issue.
You don't need a form, a legal form. You can send a letter like that says, because of federal and your state law has it codified somewhere, that they're supposed to notify you, whether it's buried in your school, whatever, is that tomorrow, send a letter.
Can you address this? Can you address that they don't get paid through insurance? They're starting to, the schools in some states are starting to put in for Medicaid. They want to get
for VDOE, adopted Medicaid. That's why the push for all children to have IEPs is that look up your state's Department of Education.
Right. And so the counselor works for the school, but they're incentivized when they, as part of their job to make sure the Medicaid dollars are rolling in. So
just
while
like
they
CPS
personally
getting bonus from the feds to adopt children out of CPS to non-parental. I mean, it's the same thing. And so like Medicaid, that was a big thing here in Virginia last year, was Medicaid being brought in for all these kids getting this, is that they're getting, everything's about, everybody says follow the money.
Sometimes, so don't they partner with community agencies who make the Medicaid money? Yes, but they are bringing those community agencies inside the building.
Without your permission.
In New Jersey, as an example, they are literally moving to attach them to the building. Like they're part of the campus. The goal of the Department of Education is to have this community school where it's literally one campus. And they are trying to get the schools licensed for hospital use. In other words, they're trying to get this community school. They are trying to have this campus,
primary care.
Across all of it be basically a licensed hospital, be a hospital. Yep. And so then they will get the money. It won't go through the private. It'll just be, it's a self-licking lollipop.
Yep.
And, I'm sure on accounting, it'll be like, it went to the Department of blah, blah, blah. And what you find is some of these community agencies / private corporations / whatever is providing the care, whatever, wink, wink, nod, nod. You'll follow that paper trail and find that they were a member of the local city council owns that company, or
Chamber
the
of
person on the
Commerce
school board
that you'll find on the Chamber of Commerce who's
person who gave the
driving
biggest donation to the local
Genworth,
whatever.
Anthem. Like you'll find, like if you look up who's driving your 21st century skills in your state, that's determining what your kids learn, it's probably going to be Anthem.
Right. Public-private partnership, isn't it awesome?
Like community. When you read community,
hey, what do
when
I know?
you read community partnership, you need to ask specifically who is that. Who are you? Just like a field trip, you're going to expose my child to who. You have to have a permission slip. So if you're going to have a community partnership, I need to know. You have to tell me. I want to know who you're partnering with. That is not a county or government employee that has access to my child. And if you're not like that, like it's the same logic. Like as a field trip, like you're going to expose my child to what?
Well, remember we talked about this in our show on DESA, Panorama, etc. These people, when they come in to do trainings and or implement the SEL programming in the school, which is pretty much it's group therapy, they are given school official status. They don't work for the government. They're not state employees. They work for those private corporations. The school gives them status as school officials, which gives them the access to your child, and they have the same protection. They have that same legal protection that every other person.
Right. And FERPA.
What is it? In qualified immunity, they get it by virtue of you are a school official when you are in this building. Yeah.
So if you know,
you the parent have less authority to go into the building than these.
If you know
Panorama Ed
enough to ask who gets access to my child's data, if you know that, and you get told school officials, normal people would say okay, but you don't. Who are you? Because it's third party. It's Bill Gates. It's Chan Zuckerberg. It's World Economic Forum. It's everybody you can imagine. And then the statewide longitudinal database goes like this with your child's data. And don't mention, well, what happened to parental consent? Obama also gave the schools, and your child can give in loco parentis parental consent for you. That's why all this stuff that usually used to fall under HIPAA doesn't anymore. That would be Obama also with FERPA giving the schools parental ability to consent to all this without you.
The number of parents I run into who think that, well, they can't do this without my permission, who don't realize they are doing so many things without your explicit permission. You have no idea. You really have got to dig into this. And I think because it's so overwhelming, your better bet is assume they are making all kinds of decisions, like whatever you can imagine.
I wouldn't even ask at this point because I went through it last year. Yeah. I would roll in and not even ask them. And I would say, you're not doing this. I would just, whoop, you're not doing this anymore. I would not give them the benefit of the doubt.
This is no longer true. That you have to meet with a licensed clinician and give permission prior to receiving services. No, you do not.
Well, I will say this. So it is codified in Virginia that you cannot talk to a child in any counseling. That I would say this. So, but you bring the law to them and they laugh at you. So
it used to be enforced by just people being decent people and following their ethical code and following the law.
And the law.
Now the reality that it has no teeth is being leveraged to the hill. In other words,
because there's nobody to enforce it.
Parents have to be the ones to enforce it. And so, and they also get around it by redefining what counseling is. So in other words, it is still true that they cannot go individually in a room and sit and counsel your kid and say, hey kid, without your consent. But they can do what we just showed you. They can assess your kid, diagnose your kid, label your kid, put all kinds of data in a system about your kid, make observations about your kid to third and fourth parties. They can do all of that without ever asking your permission. You do not need to give your permission to them to do that. And that can be more damaging than anything, because that starts them down the path to them saying, oh, you need to see a counselor. Well, maybe you don't. Maybe your kid doesn't need to see a counselor. And now you feel like, oh gosh, okay, well, I'll give my permission for them to see a licensed clinician. And so you give the permission for them to see the counselor who diagnosed them unethically in the first place, or who was part of that process. So,
like the problem is that like we have like PK, like autism links on, like, if you go to your school site, they'll be like, your child can click a button and without your permission to have an appointment.
Yep.
Yes. It's like, I was listening to exoteric, esoteric. Like I was saying that the other, trying to explain it. Like, you don't speak. You're sitting there going, yeah, sounds good.
So you're saying,
no, they're speaking a completely different language than you.
Right. And so what they do is, no, they can't meet individually with your child. So they get a group of 3.
Right.
They get a group of 3. They call it SEL and they counsel them.
Right.
It's legal. They
and
just call it SEL.
I say, how do you do this all
day?
And I'm like,
they're doing group therapy.
You have to do it. You have to figure it out. Like, I did it because I cared enough. Like, everybody, you have to. Like, I don't know how else. Like, these are children, and like, you have to.
They're counting on us. Everything that goes on in the school when we're not there, understand that our children believe, whether it's true or not, and most often it's not, they believe that we agree with it. They believe, especially when they're young. So we're talking like 6th grade and below. They assume that we know about it. Or should. And if we don't, our children will hold us accountable. Our children will say, how do you not know this, mom? Okay. Or dad. So they assume we know. They assume we agree with it. And they're more likely, therefore, to go along with it. Okay. It takes quite a unique personality to say, I'm not doing this. Okay. And that might get them in trouble. And then you run the risk, and the schools know this. If you don't agree, or you seek too hard to find out, and you ruffle their feathers, now your kid is in their crosshairs for retribution, as are you. And you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So our recommendation always is start quietly. Okay. Don't go burn down the house, go dig up what you can dig up quietly and naively ask questions. I just want to learn more, whatever. Like, you play the game a little bit, because you want to get as much information as you possibly can and digest it and decide how you feel about it and what you think about it and what it actually means and so forth and so on, and get your questions answered before you escalate to like frustration and, demands and FOIAs and things. Because you need to be able to evaluate at each stage. Okay, if I'm already this frustrated and this is already this opaque, and I already have to FOIA, and I'm seeing red flag, is it better for my child and me and my family and our whole situation to stay in the system and keep going with these escalations that will have repercussions? They just will.
Correct.
Or to leave.
Right.
Have I seen enough?
Remember,
have I seen enough that I'm just going to quietly disconnect, disengage and go on my merry way?
When we first met, I was like, I think I can fix it. I think I can. And then by the end, I was like, I tell people every day, can you get them out? And I mean, like literally by scraping, and can you survive and get them out? If you can, and that means by being a selfless parent and sacrificing everything that you have to get them out. But mine are out, but I'm here fighting because, oh my God, the future that these kids have, even if mine are out of the system.
Same, mine are out too, but
what kind of world are we going to leave them?
Who are they going to work for? Who are they going to, who's going to make the rules when I'm in a nursing home? It's like, we all have skin in the game, but you really, there is no Messiah here. There's not going to be like a candidate, a new governor, a new school board, a new president. And this is not going to be solved politically. Cultural problems are not solved politically. So you're not going to vote the right person in and fix this problem. You're also not, and as much as I agree with the book challenges, because the books that they're challenging deserve to be challenged, they're absolute filth. Okay. But that in and of itself is, the reaction is the action to a large degree. They want you distracted with all of that. That's why the books are there in the first place. The kids probably aren't even reading them.
Correct.
And that's not to say they should be there. They shouldn't, but they're, we get so laser focused on one thing. We forget that the whole system is organized to cut you out. Parents are not supposed to be involved. So every time they say to you, we want to involve parents and parents need to be involved, that's not true. What they mean is they want parents on board and agreement with them, involved in their plan, involved in validating what they have planned for you and your child.
Okay.
Right? And not trying to get your individual child's needs met. That they do not want, because you're in the way. Yeah. They envision a different future. So people ask me all the time, like, but I don't get it. Don't they want the kids to read? And don't they want to, like, actually no? And if you ask them, they're not going to say, no, we don't want the kids to read. That's not what they're going to say. They're just going to say, it's not as high a priority. And they have said so in so many words. I could go and dig up for you quotes and so forth, where it's been said that academic success and achievement is secondary to social emotional learning and EQ.
When do you ever hear about academics is what I read the document. Do you like, when are these kids ever
it's like, once we get done with all this stuff, we can talk about achievement, because the achievement can't happen until all this happens, which, as I've said, is a lie, but they never seem to get around to it again. Or it's like it's an afterthought, or they teach reading within the SEL, or they teach science within the SEL. They teach math within the SEL.
Yes.
It's not that they're teaching SEL within math. They're teaching math within SEL.
CASEL systemic SEL. Right. And they will give you lesson plans on how you embed it into math.
Yes.
They are that bold now. It's right here.
They envision a society, they envision in the 21st century where our kids are basically going to be managing and running AI and other computer systems, that they will be able to have computers do all their computation, all their writing, all of their thinking. And that they need to just interact interpersonally with the other pod people who are running the AI or whatever, I guess. I don't know. So they need to have the right thoughts and the right attitudes. And then we will have this wonderful society where everybody treats everybody so well. And we all share everything equitably, because we won't need to strive. We won't need to achieve. We won't need to be, worried about who's doing better than somebody else, because the computers are going to do it, you guys. And our children are just going to live lives of just, being of service to the computers and to each other.
Competing for button pusher jobs. Like, that's going to be the alpha and the beta. Like, that's going to be like what the kids are striving for.
I've had teachers say, we don't need to teach long division. They're never going to need long division. They're just going to use a calculator. I've had people say they don't need to learn how to write because they'll just type. Correct. I've had people look me in the face, straight face, and say this to me. They don't need a dictionary or to know how to use one or to know how to alphabetize anything, because they're just going to say, hey, AI in my house, how do you spell blah, 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 whatever? And what does it mean? And of course, we all know, those of us who are older than, dirt like me, but we all know that this is fraud and malpractice and completely insane. It's
completely insane.
A fantasy of the wildest variety. They assume so many things.
Everything that happened before now doesn't matter, because you can look it up on a computer. You don't need to know anything about anything.
But by the way, don't use so much electricity, because it's bad. We want a kill switch for the electricity, so we don't, you can reduce your carbon footprint. But you can just look everything up on a
we're
computer.
Just gonna flip your power off. But what happens?
But you can look everything up on a computer.
And you don't. But your internet's not working anymore. Like,
right. And
that's
so
how
what
you crash
happens?
a world.
Whoop, what happens to your child? We already have children who cannot read cursive at all.
How about the ones that
cannot read the original Constitution?
When you give them cash, when you give them cash at a checkout and they don't know how to give you change. Where does that come from?
They'll tell you, they'll look you in the face and go, we're going to a cashless society. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, scan my face and kiss my ass is what I tell them.
So, there's that. Anyway, so
I got kiddos that need to go to bed.
Same. I mean, I'm the kiddo who needs to go to bed. My other kiddo will be up way past my bedtime. So we thank you for sticking with us through this fairly complicated topic. And thank you for all your commentary and thank you as always for your deep dive research. Guys, you're just gonna need to dig into this. There's no easy answer. Like I said, your takeaways should be, says who, like according to who.
Can you define that?
And who asked for this?
Even your politicians when they're benefits, running. What does that mean from it? What does that mean to you when you say, what does 21st century skills mean to you?
Most importantly, who is going to be held accountable if they're wrong?
Right. There's no responsibility, but they've taken our rights. When the kids kill themselves, because it's happening left and right, we're blaming the wrong thing. We're saying, oh, they're killing themselves, mental health crisis, let's give them more. How about the lessons that you taught them when they were 8 that their little brains could not process?
Right.
If you don't know about it, you're going to blame yourself your entire life because your 13-year-old killed themselves.
Nothing makes you feel better about yourself really than competence. Than feeling competent and feeling like you have some control in your environment, that I can do things, I can take care of myself. That goes a long, long way towards improving your mental health. Feeling helpless and dependent, feeling codependent, like I have to look for approval to other people just to function and be okay.
Right.
These things will absolutely destroy your mental health. When the school is focused on equity and social justice, the message to a good percentage of the students is you're not okay. Right. You're not okay the way you are. You have to change. And we're talking about kids who are brand
We have to fix you.
They couldn't possibly be racist. I'm sorry.
No.
Pre-K, they're not racist.
No, they're not. So
anyway, thank you everyone.
Till next time.
Please like, share, comment, subscribe if you aren't already, and we will see you next time.
All right.
Take it easy.
Bye guys. Bye Deb.
Bye.